Have you ever noticed how an avoidant can seem deeply interested one day and emotionally unavailable the next? It feels like the connection disappears without warning. One moment they're affectionate, engaged, and making you believe something real is growing. Then suddenly, they become distant, emotionally closed off, and behave as though the relationship never meant much. That kind of rejection can leave you questioning everything. You replay conversations, analyze every interaction, and wonder if you caused them to pull away. The reality is often very different from what your mind tells you. In many cases, their withdrawal has far less to do with your value than with the way they have learned to protect themselves emotionally. Their reactions are usually driven by deeply rooted attachment patterns, an intense fear of vulnerability, and the discomfort that comes whenever emotional closeness starts to feel too real. There's something important that very few people understand about this process. After an avoidant rejects someone, they often expect a certain type of response. Most people assume they want to be chased because they secretly enjoy the attention. But that's usually not what's happening beneath the surface. What they actually expect is a reaction that reinforces the emotional pattern they've carried for years. Many people respond to rejection by trying harder. They send long messages explaining their feelings, ask for another conversation, search for closure, or desperately try to convince the avoidant that the relationship is worth saving. Those responses come from genuine pain, but to an avoidant's nervous system, they can feel like pressure rather than love. This is why chasing rarely creates the outcome people hope for. Every emotional appeal, every attempt to fix things immediately, and every request for reassurance unintentionally supports the avoidant's internal belief that intimacy comes with demands, expectations, and emotional weight. Instead of making them feel safer, it often convinces them that creating even more distance is the only way to regain a sense of control. For many avoidants, distance has always been their way of feeling secure. Pulling away isn't simply a decision. It's a protective strategy their mind has relied on for years. Once they create that distance, they naturally expect the other person to pursue them. That expectation isn't always conscious, but it has become part of the emotional cycle they know so well. Now imagine something completely different happens. Instead of chasing, you remain calm. Instead of pleading for another chance, you accept what happened with quiet confidence. You don't argue. You don't try to force another conversation. You don't attempt to make them feel guilty. You simply respect yourself enough to let them go with dignity. That response is incredibly unexpected. It interrupts the pattern they were prepared for. They expected emotional intensity. They expected resistance. They expected proof that closeness always becomes overwhelming. Instead, they are met with silence, maturity, and emotional stability. Ironically, this is what many avoidants secretly hope for after they reject someone. Deep down, they wish you would simply move forward without creating conflict or emotional chaos. On the surface, that seems like exactly what they wanted all along. But there is another layer beneath it. When someone reacts with anger, desperation, or constant attempts to reconnect, the avoidant can use that behavior to justify staying emotionally shut down. It becomes evidence for the story they've repeated to themselves for years. This is exactly why I keep people at a distance. Relationships always become too emotionally complicated. I knew getting close would eventually turn into pressure. Those beliefs allow them to avoid looking inward because the focus stays on your reaction instead of their own fears. But everything changes when you leave with grace. When you don't beg, accuse, or try to convince them to stay, they lose the explanation they expected to rely on. Suddenly, there is no emotional storm to point at. No dramatic argument to prove they made the right choice. No guilt trip to justify their escape. What remains is silence. And silence has a way of revealing truths that constant noise can hide. Without your pursuit distracting them, they are left alone with their own thoughts. The distance they fought so hard to create no longer protects them from themselves. Instead, it becomes a mirror reflecting the fears, insecurities, and emotional walls they've spent years avoiding. For someone who has built their identity around staying emotionally independent, that mirror can be deeply uncomfortable. It forces questions they weren't expecting to ask. Did they push away someone who genuinely cared? Were they protecting themselves, or were they running from intimacy? Did fear make the decision instead of wisdom? Those are not easy questions to face. And this is the part that surprises most people. Sometimes the strongest response to rejection isn't saying more, it's saying nothing at all. Choosing peace over pursuit doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped trying to earn love from someone who wasn't emotionally available to receive it. That quiet strength doesn't just protect your own heart, it also removes every distraction that once allowed the avoidant to escape from confronting their own emotional reality. And that is where the real story begins. If you'd like, I can continue rewriting the next part in the same style, so the entire script flows naturally as one seamless piece. The biggest misconception about avoidants is that they don't feel deeply. In reality, many of them experience powerful emotions. They've simply learned to hide them. Behind the calm face and emotional distance often lives someone carrying unresolved pain, fear of vulnerability, and years of protecting themselves from getting hurt. They aren't incapable of love. They've just become experts at keeping their guard up. When you stop reacting to their rejection, something unexpected happens. The wall they usually hide behind begins to disappear. Your silence doesn't punish them. Instead, it leaves them alone with emotions they normally avoid. Without your pursuit keeping the focus on you, they have no choice but to sit with their own discomfort. That quiet confidence becomes your greatest strength. It's the one response they rarely anticipate because it doesn't fit the emotional pattern they're used to repeating. Most avoidants unconsciously expect relationships to become a tug of war. They create distance, and the other person immediately tries to close the gap. They pull away, and someone else reaches even harder. That familiar cycle reassures them that intimacy always comes with pressure. But imagine refusing to play that game. Imagine responding with genuine respect instead of resistance. You simply acknowledge their decision, wish them well, and allow them the space they asked for. Not because you're trying to make them miss you, but because you value yourself enough not to fight for someone who has already stepped back. That changes everything. It doesn't just surprise them, it interrupts the emotional script they've followed for years. Now they're no longer reacting to your emotions, they're left sitting with their own. And here's something many people overlook. Avoidants may fear emotional closeness, but they also struggle with uncertainty, especially when it isn't something they created themselves. They're accustomed to controlling the distance in relationships. When you quietly accept their decision and continue living your life without chasing, the sense of control they expected begins to fade. Instead of wondering how to escape your pursuit, they begin wondering about you. Why didn't you beg? Why didn't you argue? Why didn't you keep reaching out? Why did you seem at peace instead of falling apart? Those unanswered questions can become surprisingly powerful because they challenge the expectations their mind was relying on. Choosing to let go after rejection isn't the same as giving up on love. It's choosing not to abandon yourself in order to keep someone else. It means recognizing that your worth isn't determined by another person's emotional availability. You don't have to convince someone to see your value. The right people won't require endless proof that you're deserving of care, respect, and consistency. So instead of pouring all your energy into someone who keeps stepping away, you begin investing it back into yourself. You start paying attention to the wounds their rejection exposed. Maybe it awakened fears of abandonment. Maybe it triggered old beliefs that you weren't enough. Instead of chasing external reassurance, you begin healing those parts from within. As time passes, something remarkable begins to happen. Your nervous system slowly settles. You stop interpreting every delayed response as rejection. You stop believing that someone's emotional distance is evidence that you're unworthy of love. Their silence loses its power over your emotions because your sense of security is no longer tied to their behavior. That inner peace becomes something no one else can control. No avoidant can give it to you, and no avoidant can take it away. Ironically, this is often the point where an avoidant reappears, not necessarily because they've completely transformed or suddenly figured everything out. More often, it's because your absence created room for thoughts and feelings they had been avoiding. Without your messages, your pursuit, or your emotional energy filling the space, they're left confronting questions they successfully pushed aside before. The distance they wanted doesn't feel exactly the way they imagined it would. And because they're so accustomed to managing the emotional balance in relationships, your calm acceptance feels unfamiliar. It's different from what they've experienced before. Instead of seeing desperation, they see confidence. Instead of seeing emotional dependence, they see independence. Instead of seeing someone waiting for them, they see someone continuing with life. That difference naturally sparks curiosity. They begin wondering what changed. They may question why you didn't react like other people have, why you respected their decisions so easily, why you seemed emotionally grounded instead of devastated. Those questions can draw them back toward you, not always because they've reached genuine emotional maturity, but because they're trying to understand something that doesn't fit the pattern they expected. Sometimes they'll reach out with small messages. Sometimes they'll casually check in or find subtle reasons to reconnect. Other times they'll simply observe from a distance, trying to figure out whether you've truly moved on. The important thing to remember is this: curiosity is not the same as commitment. Confusion is not the same as emotional growth. Just because they return doesn't automatically mean they're ready to build the healthy relationship they couldn't offer before. Your strength isn't measured by whether they come back. It's measured by whether you've grown enough to recognize the difference between someone who is genuinely ready to change and someone who simply misses having access to your energy. If you continue sending the remaining sections, I'll keep rewriting them in the same style, so the entire script reads as one seamless original narration for Avoidarian. If they do come back, that's the moment to be especially careful. It's easy to assume their return means everything has changed, but reaching out and being emotionally available are two very different things. A message, a phone call, or a sudden burst of attention doesn't automatically mean they're prepared to build a healthier relationship than before. This is where many people slip back into the same cycle. Instead of asking whether the avoidant misses them, ask a more important question. Have their actions actually changed? Are they showing consistency instead of disappearing whenever intimacy grows? Are they willing to communicate honestly, or are they only reaching out because they're feeling lonely, guilty, or uncomfortable with the silence? Those answers matter far more than the excitement of hearing from them again. You don't have to become a detective trying to analyze every message or hidden meaning behind their behavior. That responsibility doesn't belong to you. Your focus is no longer on solving them. It's on protecting the peace you've worked so hard to build. During the time they were gone, you discovered something valuable. You learned that your emotional stability doesn't have to depend on another person's presence. You realized that your happiness isn't something someone else gets to control. Don't lose that lesson simply because they've returned. For many avoidants, the ideal situation is one where they can create distance without ever facing the emotional consequences of doing so. They expect the relationship to quietly fade away while they avoid looking inward. But when you choose dignity instead of desperation, something changes. By refusing to participate in the familiar push and pull dynamic, you quietly challenge the story they've always believed. You become living proof that love doesn't have to involve chasing, convincing, or sacrificing your own self-respect. You stop believing that affection must be earned through endless patience or emotional suffering. That isn't emotional coldness. It's personal growth. If you've experienced rejection from someone who constantly pulled away, then you already know how disorienting it can feel. One day you're hopeful, the next you're questioning your worth. The uncertainty can become emotionally exhausting because you're trying to understand behavior that rarely follows a clear pattern. But here's the lesson that changes everything. Your response to rejection shapes your recovery far more than the rejection itself. Someone else's inability to stay emotionally close doesn't mean you have to lose yourself in the process. There will be quiet days when no messages arrive, moments when the phone stays silent, times when you wonder if they ever think about you at all. Those moments may feel empty at first, but they're also where genuine healing begins. It's during those stretches of silence that you learn to comfort yourself instead of depending on someone else to do it. You begin validating your own emotions instead of waiting for another person's reassurance. You allow yourself to grieve what was lost without turning that grief into proof that something is wrong with you. You acknowledge your pain without letting it define your identity. That kind of emotional strength cannot be taken away because it wasn't built on another person's approval. It was built by choosing yourself, even when doing so felt incredibly difficult. And ultimately, that's the most powerful response anyone can offer after rejection. Not revenge, not resentment, not pretending you never cared. Real strength looks different. It looks like becoming the version of yourself that no longer settles for emotional inconsistency. It looks like refusing relationships where love is uncertain, one-sided, or constantly dependent on chasing someone who keeps pulling away. It looks like creating standards that protect your heart instead of abandoning them just to keep someone close. As you continue growing, something else naturally happens. You become less attracted to people who run from emotional intimacy and more drawn toward those who know how to stay present when relationships become vulnerable. Instead of constantly wondering where you stand, you begin choosing connections built on honesty, consistency, and emotional safety. Those are the relationships that last. So yes, many avoidants quietly hope you'll walk away without forcing them to confront the fears they've spent years hiding from. They hope the distance will erase the discomfort and allow life to continue exactly as it always has. But your story doesn't have to end there. You don't have to remain trapped in the role of the person who keeps chasing, waiting, or trying to earn love that should never require proving in the first place. You have another choice. You can heal instead of holding on. You can protect your peace instead of sacrificing it. You can become someone whose self-worth is rooted within, not in another person's ability to love consistently. And when you choose that path, rejection no longer becomes the end of your story. It becomes the moment your real transformation begins. This version keeps the original message while using fresh wording, smoother transitions, and a natural storytelling style suitable for Avoidarian. You have the freedom to make a different choice now. You no longer have to spend your energy pursuing people who keep running from emotional closeness. Instead, you can begin welcoming relationships with people who are capable of meeting you with the same openness, honesty, and commitment that you bring to the table. When you look back one day, you may realize that the rejection you feared so much wasn't the end of your journey at all. It was simply life pointing you in a healthier direction. Sometimes the greatest gift another person gives us is their inability to stay, because it forces us to reconnect with the parts of ourselves we forgot while trying so hard to hold on to them. There is a beautiful quote from the Persian poet and mystic Rumi that captures this idea perfectly. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Those words remind us that lasting love doesn't begin by convincing someone else to choose us. It begins by removing the fears, insecurities, and emotional wounds that keep us chasing people who cannot truly meet us where we are. Once that healing begins, everything changes. Love no longer feels like a constant struggle where you're fighting to be seen or appreciated. It stops feeling like a game of proving your worth or earning someone's affection. Instead, love becomes a place of safety, peace, and mutual effort. It begins to feel like coming home rather than surviving another emotional battle. If you've stayed with me until this moment, I want you to remember one thing above everything else. An avoidant rejecting you does not mean you were too emotional, too caring, or somehow not enough. More often than not, it simply means they weren't in a place where they could receive the depth, honesty, and connection you were offering. Never mistake another person's emotional limitations for evidence that your love lacked value. The fact that you're here, listening, reflecting, and choosing to grow instead of remaining trapped in the same painful cycle says something important about you. It shows courage. It shows self-awareness. It shows a willingness to heal instead of repeating old patterns. There is nothing weak about loving someone wholeheartedly. The real strength comes when you learn how to love without sacrificing your own peace, your own dignity, or your own identity in the process. That is the kind of strength that changes every relationship you have from this point forward. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to support the channel by leaving a like. It helps Avoidarian reach more people who may be struggling with the same questions and searching for the same clarity. If you're ready to keep growing, subscribe for more conversations like this, where we transform rejection into self-respect, confusion into understanding, and emotional pain into lasting personal growth. I'd also love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one healthy boundary you're committed to keeping with avoidant people from now on. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Always remember this: you were never meant to spend your life chasing people who are frightened by genuine connection. You were meant to become someone who shines with confidence, authenticity, and self-respect without apologizing for any of it. If someone chooses to walk away, let that be their decision. Your responsibility is to keep moving toward the life and relationships that are capable of meeting you with the same love you freely give. Keep healing, keep growing, keep choosing peace instead of chasing approval. And never forget that every step you take toward yourself is also a step toward the kind of love you've deserved all along. Thank you for spending this time with Avoidarian. I'll see you in the next video.